Hello, Bigfoot enthusiasts. Scott here from Squatch America, and tonight we are live at the Ison House in Baker City, Oregon. The Ison House was built in 1887 by Judge Ison, and we're going to talk about Bigfoot here. And we have a group here, and this is our first town hall in Baker City, Oregon. So let's get started. So for those of you who know me or don't know me, I'm going to give you a little background about me and how I got into hunting Bigfoot. My first career was in the United States Army as a combat infantry medic. Did 2 tours in Iraq, got out, took that money that the government gave me for college, got a degree in anthropology, and I went to working with Native American tribes all over the nation. My expertise is in Native American culture. We're going to be talking about that tonight. And every tribe in the nation has a Bigfoot legend. And my first career in the infantry and the soldier, I was also a survival expert, wilderness survival. So living in the woods comes natural to me. So that all equals Bigfoot hunter, right? Okay. So what actually got me into this was the Native Americans. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our group and what we do. As soon as I started talking, that shut off. Oh, we know it.
Of course.
Of course. There we go. Okay. And it works. Yes, we are a scientifically based research group dedicated to classifying the culture of the North American primate known as Bigfoot. If you notice, I didn't say trying to classify that they exist, because I know they do. And we're going to get into that later. But as a cultural anthropologist, I'm trying to figure out how these things live, what their family's structure's like, their lifespan, gestation periods, the whole thing about how these things survive. We're a national group. We have researchers that are part of our group all over the United States. So we have a website, it's squatchamerica.com, and we get about 150 reports a month from people all over the nation. And we disseminate those reports to whatever area is close enough to the researcher that we have and follow up on them. Right now we're going to be in Baker City for the whole summer, so I'll be following up on myself on all the reports in this area. So our motto is, our job is to investigate the unexplained, not to explain the uninvestigated. In other words, I'm very scientifically based, hence my background. Okay, I'm going to be talking about 3 things tonight, real quick. We're going to be talking about the evidence. Footprints, photos, and archaeology. There is archaeology, by the way. So the first one we're going to be talking about is dermal ridges, fingerprints. One of the most famous Bigfoot sightings was found in, oh my gosh, date went out of my head. Freeman film, 1994. Okay, right here in the Blue Mountains. Anybody familiar with a place called Tollgate? Everybody around here has. Well, in 1994, a Forest Service worker named Paul Freeman came across footprints. And he followed those tracks right to the actual Bigfoot, and they filmed he got 20 seconds of film of a Bigfoot right here in the Blue Mountains, right up the road here. What's interesting is this is the footprint he found, and if you look carefully right here in the little toe, you can see dermal ridges, fingerprints. Now these fingerprints were taken to the FBI fingerprint lab. They ran it through the CODA system to see if Bigfoot was wanted. He wasn't. But no, it came back out of the system non-human. It doesn't match human patterns. Since then, a fingerprint expert also with the police, his name went out of my head. I checked. No, anyway, he followed up and he actually went and fingerprinted primates. He fingerprinted chimpanzees, gorillas from the zoo. They don't match that either. They're completely unique in the world of primates. The fingerprints you see right here in the toe. Now, I'm going to pass this around and let you look at it, but please don't drop it. Okay. All right. So, the dermal ridges we find have a unique pattern. It's similar to humans, but in the heel, you'll find there's these side stripes in the heels of the patterns of these. That's one of the things when we have fingerprints in Bigfoot casts that we see. They have a unique pattern and we can identify those. I can tell the difference when somebody fakes a footprint by the way it's shaped, one, and by the fingerprints when they push their thumbs where the toes are supposed to be. And if it matches humans, you know, I know it's a fake. But there's a lot less fakes than you think out there. Now, this one here, one of our researchers found in 5/13/21. Just last year, this was found down in Anderson, California area, which is really close to the Oregon border. And in the heel, you got the same stripe patterns as these. These stripe patterns were taken from Bluff Creek in 1967 by a guy named Roger Patterson. And they have the similar side stripe patterns in the heel. Okay? Oh. Next one I'm going to get into is this is a very famous footprint. It's called Cripple Foot. This was found in 1969 and in 1970 in a place called Bosburg, Washington. It was about the center of Washington State, north by the Canadian border. Okay, if you notice, it has one normal foot and one cripple foot, hence Cripple Foot. Now, this is pretty unique because if you were to draw the bone structure out, and this was done by a professor of anthropology from Washington State University named Grover Krantz. He drew this out, and he figured out that these two nodules on the side stem from the separation of these two bones. He took this to a podiatrist and didn't tell the podiatrist that this was a Bigfoot. He just showed the drawing of this and said, "What's wrong with this guy's foot?" The podiatrist said, "That's easy. It's clubfoot. It's a natural ailment that humans have. Apparently a natural ailment that Bigfoot have, because these are only 17 inches long almost." And not only that, they found a few of these footprints over 2 years. And as they stepped on different substrates, the foot would bend and flex and it would be shaped slightly different. So it wasn't a hard thing. So if this was faked, it was faked by a podiatrist 1,089 times, because we found 1,089 of these footprints. So. And that's from a genetic problem. Last year, last October, one of our researchers in Vermont found this footprint. And if you draw the bone structure out, it matches the clubfoot exactly. If you notice the two nodules on the side of the foot right here, it's a lot smaller. It's the opposite foot. But this is a second clubfoot find, quite a few years apart, like from 1970 to 2021. This was in Vermont, the other one was in Washington. Now this one here, if you look at it, it almost looks identical if you have to make them the same size. If you overlay them, they're almost identical. So if it was fake, this was faked by a podiatrist, you know, a lot of years later. We found 75 of these footprints. And after talking to some doctors and podiatrists and stuff, this is a genetic problem from inbreeding in small populations. When I was in anthropology school, we studied what's called the ostrich people of Africa. Their feet look like ostrich feet. It's because it's a small tribe that has inbred over many, many years. And the first genetic problem that happens in inbreeding is foot deformation. So this is caused by inbreeding in small populations. That one. So another one is how they walk. And we can tell how they walk by the footprint tracks that we find. The difference between a human and a Bigfoot is this. Guess which one's a human? Okay. There's something that humans have that Bigfoot doesn't. They have an arch. We have an arch in our foot. If we did not have that arch in our foot would bend in the middle like every other primate on the planet, like gorillas and chimpanzees and everybody else. Bigfoot doesn't have an arch. They have, this here is called the calcaneus. The calcaneus in a Bigfoot is longer than the one in a human, because they have right here, their foot bends because they don't have an arch that stops it from bending. So this is what's called a mid-tarsal break. If you look at the footprints this way, they're pretty incredible, but if you look at it this way, you can learn a lot. Because when they step flat, their foot bends in the middle, they come off their toes, and their foot's almost directly straight up in the air. So the footprint pattern will look like that. But if you look, there's a dip right here. So if you're stepping flat, your foot makes an imprint. That's the depth of this. As your foot bends in the middle, it takes the weight off the center, so there's no center. This is deeper than this because the weight goes here first, next. And then when it goes off the toes are actually deeper than the forefoot because this is the last thing that comes off the ground. Mm-hmm. So there's actually science to this thing. So you can see how a human bends here, but a Bigfoot bends here. If you watch this film, there's a couple things that you can notice. A lot of people, this film was taken in 1967 on a film camera, way before digital images. But if you look really closely how it steps, and when it looks back, how it doesn't turn its head, it turns its whole body, it's because it doesn't have a neck. But if you look, how many people walk, do you see the bottom of their foot straight up and down every time they take a step with either foot? People don't walk like that.
Only horses.
Yeah. And another thing while they're stepping, you can see they never lock their knees. We hit our heel, vault over our hip, heel, vault over our hip. That's why we bounce when we walk. Bigfoot walks with what they call a compliant gait. You have his knees bent, his steps, his foot hits the floor flat, not heel, flat. Toe comes off the ground straight up there, comes up. That's how you get a 56-inch step. If you watch this red line, see the shoulder? It's lined up on the shoulder all the way across the screen. Notice how it doesn't go up. It stays level like it's gliding. A lot of people call these things ghosts sometimes because they see it's floating through the forest because it's not bouncy. It's just the way it walks. Hey, bud. Haven't seen you in a while. All right. So, what's really interesting is I want to share some of this stuff with you. This is a 15-inch footprint that we found, and a 9-inch footprint, which was next to this 15-inch footprint. I wasn't able to cast the other ones because it went straight up a hill about this steep. I did get the 9-inch print done, but if you notice, I had to keep swiping the stuff up there because it was draining out, because it was literally at an angle like this, walking straight up a hill. But this was in really, loose mud, so it really made an imprint. So there's not a lot of detail, but you can kind of see the toes up here. But do you see something in the middle? It still has that metatarsal break in the center of it, where the foot bent in the middle when it was going up the hill. I had an eyewitness with me when we found those. That guy right there.
I recognize those pictures.
Yeah. So this is one I found up in the toll gate area. I did not cast it. I didn't have the stuff with me, and I had to come back a week later when I did have the casting stuff with me, and the grass had grown up through it, and it was gone. But it was a 14-inch print. I did get photos. It goes back to here, and you can see the toes, and you can even see the metatarsal break in the center right there. This is just outside of a place called Target Meadows Campground, if you're familiar with the toll gate area up there. It's kind of south of Jubilee Lake. That's that cast I showed you in the footprints. You can see the toes here. This one here is almost 20 inches long. It's 19 inches long. This one was actually in Maine, and the ground in Maine is a lot different than the dirt here. Maine's made out of rock, in case you didn't know. It's almost solid rock. And where this was, there's sand, it was just sand and rock, so it didn't go down very deep. And you can see there's a little dip right here. That's because that rock there pushed the foot up. But it does go all the way around like this, and you can see the toes up here. So it wasn't very, yeah, I'm not going to pass this one around, but 11, 12 foot, maybe 10, I don't know. But we found this one in Maine last year. I found 2 of these where it was actually in a campground, believe it or not. It had stepped out of the woods, made one step into the campground area, probably saw somebody, backed up, went back into the woods. So there's that. So we're going to talk about photographic evidence, and this is the least reliable point of evidence, especially today. Back in the day when you had film cameras, it was a little different story, but today, since the invention of Photoshop, photographs are pretty much worthless. Even though I can explain some stuff to you. You guys see the Bigfoot? Anyone? I know some people looking hard. I had a guy with me when I took that picture too. Believe it or not, this is Don Endicott. Raise your hand, Don. It was his birthday, and he'd never been Bigfooting before in his life. So I took him out in the woods and we saw a Bigfoot the first day he went Bigfooting. It wasn't my first day, it was my like 25 years into it. But if you look closely, you can see right here, there's the nose, the mouth, the chin, eye, big brow ridge, conical head, shoulders going off right there. Now do you get it? Now we smelt this before we saw it. Came to a dead stop. They smell bad. And the reason I think they smell bad is this. We were standing up on this hill. And now I went back and spent 2 or 3 days there measuring all this stuff. There was this log that was down the hill, was 165 feet away from me. Through that little opening through the trees here, we saw this face. Now after shooting, the face was 44 feet on the other side of that brush that I was shooting through. And this thing was a little over 6 foot tall. So that made it a juvenile. And you know why it smelled bad? I think teenage boy. Teenage boys smell bad. Okay, now we're going to get into my favorite part. This is, I'm going kind of quick tonight. I have a much longer one than I do, but the archaeology. This is what got me into Bigfoot. Now, I have worked with the Hopi, Navajo, and Miwok tribes in the United States. The Miwok tribe is probably the one I spent the most time with. The Hopi, Navajo, we were just working on an archaeological dig, and that was awesome. In case you didn't know, they were Aztecs in New Mexico. We found a ball cord, those Aztec ball cords in New Mexico. In fact, almost to Colorado. But the Miwok tribe is in Central California, in a place you might have heard of. It's called Yosemite National Park. Okay, the Miwok tribe, I worked with them for almost 4 years, and what we were trying to do was log their history in the area, because the Miwoks never got a treaty with the United States government. They were lumped in with the Paiutes at the time. They were just considered Paiutes, but they're not. They're Miwoks, they're different. They were on the other side of the hill, basically, the other side of the Sierras. And they wanted their own treaty, basically, so they could open their own casino. But here nor there, I spent 4 years with them looking at pictographs and petroglyphs all over Central California. And what got me was a pictograph that looked like this. This isn't the one, this is a different one, but that looked similar to this. And I asked the elder, what is that? He looked at me and said, that's Bigfoot. And I went, they exist? And he looked at me like I was stupid. And he goes, yeah. So I started digging into this. This right here, Daddy Bigfoot, Mama Bigfoot, Baby Bigfoot. This tells a story. This is a hunting party with a man down. This is a water spring. That's what this symbol means, spring, water. They found footprints, large ones, next to the spring, where there was game. It was eerie. The stick man, that means scary place. Eerie place. Okay? This is a ghost symbol that looks similar to this. Another stick man, scary. But what gets me is this right here. These symbols right there, those are atlatls. An atlatl is a device they use to throw spears. It's like a long stick. You have your spear to the end of it. It extends your arm so you can throw it further and faster. That was 1,500 years ago, because 1,500 years ago they invented a thing called a bow. So if the natives who made this pictograph 1,500 years ago If it had been newer than 1,500 years, that would have been a bow, not an atlatl. So this dates that to 1,500 years ago. So we got a picture of a Bigfoot that's over 1,500 years. I can't tell you exactly, but I know it's at least 1,500 years. This right here, this mask, this is carved by a tribe in Canada. Notice how monkey it looks? That is 500 years old. How does a native Canadian know what a monkey looked like 500 years ago? Unless they saw one. Same with these other masks. This pictograph. This is, see the native with the bow? So this is newer than 1,500 years. Giant creature, not a native with a bow. Giant creature with big feet and big hands. These pictographs are found all over the United States. Trackway. Native American, big creature. This one here is kind of hard to see, so I enhanced the picture a little bit. But if you look really closely, you got the big creature here. You also have this stickman figure next to it, which means scary place. This is a directional arrow back in the day, about 200 years ago. So this is probably around 200 years old. This symbol means go around this area. Don't go through this area, go around this area. That's what that means. That was painted by a tribe you might have heard of called the Nez Perce. If you look closely, this pictograph is on the road to Richland. You probably drove by it and didn't know it. So to get back to the masks, I found this to be very interesting, in especially this one here. We have a big brow ridge. We have a little button nose. We have a very straight mouth. Brow ridge. This is Patty. This is the photo I took. Brow ridge, brow ridge, brow ridge. Little button nose. Straight mouth. And a nice beard. And this is a girl, by the way. So, actually, I'm going back up. Those are pictures of Bigfoot that are at least 500 years old. So this phenomenon isn't something that just happened in the 1960s in Glover Creek. This has been going on with the Native American tribes in this nation for at least 1,500 years that we know of. There's actually stories from Vikings that landed here about seeing big creatures in New Brunswick, Canada. And what's really interesting is there's a Viking story that was carved in a rock that matches a Native American pictograph that's carved in a rock not too far away. Same story, two different cultures. So these here are all pictures I took. We have traveled across the United States 3 times. Let's see. Oregon, Maine, South Dakota, Texas, Maine, back to here. Okay, in the last 4 times in the last 2 years. while we're traveling, there's one thing I always look for is every little mom and pop shop or every little place that has a Native American museum. Or as we're driving through, different tribal lands, they have museums. We stop at all of them and I take pictures of masks that are in the museums. They all look the same, no matter where we're at in the United States. Now this one here is particular with that ooh, for the ooh sound, ooh. This one's particular to the Northwest, actually, from about Medford area north into Canada, all up the coast. So we're here to talk about Bigfoot here in the Blue Mountains. I took that picture. It's pretty. Okay. That's from Wolf Creek Road, by the way. The Blue Mountains make up 27,000 square miles of forest from here up through Montana. And a lot of people don't know this, but the Cascade Range goes down to the Sierra Range, which goes down through California. The Blue Mountains are the only mountain range that connects to the Rockies in Montana to the Sierra Nevada Range. This is a Bigfoot corridor to get from the Rockies to the Sierras. We've had hundreds and hundreds of sightings right here. In fact, that photograph I took in the footprints I showed you, Marble Creek. Right up the road here, in a place people really aren't supposed to go.
Motorized vehicles, we walk.
Oh, we walked in the Baker Valley watershed. Okay. So that's right up the hill here. And the Freeman film, believe it or not, that Freeman cast with the Dermal ridges that I started out with, 15 miles north, as the crow flies up the mountains. Or not 50, it's probably at 40, right?
Yeah, not bad.
About 40 miles north, as the crow flies. So I've got some really interesting stories of this area, but I want to hear yours. Anybody got one that wants to talk about it? Oh, does Hannah got stuff? Oh, she's trying to.
Commercial.
We need to do a commercial break. Oh, I forgot. Oh, it is. It's time.
It is time. So let me tell you, right now, I will just share with you.
Okay.
I have got some breaking news. The government does not fund Bigfoot research. And if they did, I wouldn't take it because I wouldn't like all the strings attached. So,
Yeah.
we have got a small merch table back there and Sasquatch field guides. Great. This was written by Dr. Jeff Meldrum from Idaho State University. And this has got everything you need to go out while you're hiking around or camping or whatever. And kind of, like, what am I looking at here? It's got a ruler, it's got track samples. Anyway, so we have those available for you. We have got these lovely t-shirts. He's already walked away with one. If you're shy on dollars, we have stickers. They'll be $3. You can stick them on your bumper. And the pièce de résistance.
Okay.
After a lovely friendship and collaboration with the Bigfoot Coffee Company in Medford, Squatch America now has their own dark roast. So, please, as I like to say, buy clips. Buy our merch and support the search, okay?
Yeah, because there's no government grants for Bigfoot research.
We do have
coffee.
Okay. We got coffee. All right. Yes, sir.
Do you do any work over in the Grant County area out of John Day?
Mm-hmm.
What is your comments on in Picture Gorge? Because that right there, you know, is well known to a lot of us that live there. People would go down the gorge just to take a look at the pictographs there.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us what are your thoughts on that area right there?
On Picture Gorge?
Yeah.
Okay, they do have a long history there. There's a lot of Native American history in that area. But I've got one of the most interesting reports from Picture Gorge that I can share with you. Logging crew. Now here's another thing that we get a lot of in the Bigfoot world is logging crews tend to have a lot of interactions with Bigfoot. And the reason being, I think they're cutting down trees and Bigfoot doesn't like it. I'm just guessing. But a lot of logging camps will leave at night. They'll come back the next day and their logging camp barrels will be thrown all over the place. I mean, this is a common report we get. But one of the most interesting reports we got was down in Picture Gorge, a logging crew down in that area. They had dug a pit toilet. This is a little gross. Okay. They came back the next day. All the toilet paper was picked out of the pit toilet and arranged in a nice neat pile beside the pit toilet. And all the poop was gone. Now, I would say, dogs eat poop. It could have been coyotes. But what would pick the toilet paper out and stack it in a nice neat pile next to it? I thought that was very interesting. And by the way, gorillas eat poop. I mean,
Along the same lines, we spent several years and there was a logging project going on there. Happened to be with the lumber company that I was working for at the time. And during the late hours one night, there was a situation happened, and some of the tracks were plastered such as those that you have. And I just can't bring up I won't bring up any names, but it was investigated and 50-gallon drums of oil were picked up and thrown over the side of the landings. And there were several different things that occurred at that Greasy Dick Camp is what it was called. And I'm sure you're familiar with that area. And I don't know who came in and investigated it, but they spent some time in there and actually walked away and reported back to us at Camp 5, logging camp, that it was actually done by people that were wanting to be recognized. And so I guess I just same area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's kind of hard to think how a person could pick up a 55-gallon drum.
It sure is.
And chuck it over a hill.
Yeah.
Okay.
Several.
Yeah, several. Yeah, and that brings up a good point because sometimes, you guys want to hear my tinfoil hat theory? Okay, here's my tinfoil hat theory. Okay, and this has happened to me more than once. Okay, as I'm gonna have to get into a couple. I'm gonna have to say this to say that. Okay, here's one. As an anthropologist, I've studied human evolution. At any given time in human history, there's been 2 to 3 human species living together at the same time. Why is today any different? If you think about it. I mean, it's kind of weird, actually. There have been 3 to 5 species of humans living together. Why is now there's only one? We know what happened to Neanderthal. Did you know what happened to Neanderthals? You know, in France? Yeah, you're looking at one.
That's
I'm
true.
French.
Yes.
5% of French people's DNA are Neanderthal. They did not go extinct, we bred them out. Okay? So, why is today any different? Now, this thing has probably small canine teeth because it has a wide, flat mouth, just like we do. It walks upright on 2 legs, has opposable thumbs. What does that make it? Not a primate ape. It makes it a primate hominid. This could possibly be another species of humans that just haven't went extinct yet, living here with us. They just learned to avoid us like the plague that we are. Because when we populated this area, the Native Americans, they came across Beringia, they called it, the Bering Strait, the land bridge during the Ice Age. That was land. They walked from China down here. In case you didn't know, Native Americans are Chinese. After 10,000 years living over here, they adapted and changed. But they still have Chinese fingerprints. You know that? Europeans have like swirls. Chinese have circles. Native Americans have circles in their fingerprints. So if this is another human species, here's my tinfoil hat theory. What if we prove there's another human species on the planet? The government's been, I think the government's covering it up because this has happened to me 3 times. We've got a massive reports in one area. We go to that area, controlled burn by the forest department. It's happened to me 3 times. So if we prove that this is another human species on the planet, did they get voting rights? Do they pay taxes? Do we have to close every single national forest in the United States because it's their land? Do they get a seat in the United Nations? I don't know. So that could cause a big, huge problem, not even to include, you know, religion and all that other stuff. That could cause a big uproar in our society just to prove that there's another human species living with us still today. So that's my take on that theory. Plausible.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So do you think that might have something to do with, you heard of David White's?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So the missing people in national parks, rural areas,
Uh-huh.
that have no involvement for law enforcement? Do you think that they might be a part of that?
Part of the cover-up?
Well,
Or
for
the,
the people disappearing.
oh, the government part of people disappeared.
Well, I'm talking about the Bigfoots.
Oh, yeah, I know that's been speculation about David Brooks, you know, about, he basically tracks Bigfoot sightings by people going missing in the woods. That's a broad stroke of his books, basically. I think it could be 2 things. There's actually a report we got from an Inuit from Alaska. Okay, I sat down and talked with via Zoom. But anyway, they have a legend in the Yukon River area, actually, of a gal who got fed up with her tribe and went and lived with Bigfoot, came back 30 years later. Okay, we also have reports of Bigfoot human hybrids in Russia. So I think, and there is kidnapping stories like, you know, the Osterman story, where a guy was actually kidnapped by a group of Bigfoot while he was sleeping in a sleeping bag. This was way back in the, oh gosh, when was it? 40s? I can't remember when. 40s, 50s. It might have been more recent than that. But he was out prospecting, just slept out in a sleeping bag. And some picked him up in the sleeping bag and carried him off, and he lived with Bigfoot for like 3 days until he fed him a can of Copenhagen, and they got sick and he ran away. But but that could very well be that they're kidnapping people even to breed for them.
Well, David doesn't state that he doesn't state his opinion.
No, he doesn't.
He goes by facts. He used to be a retired police officer. Detective,
Yeah.
and he's done plenty of FOIA requests to the FBI on certain things.
Yeah.
For missing person cases and stuff like that. And they're all relatively, they're all been anonymous.
Mostly her shit
It's
for
just strange because I've been thinking about this with moles being attacked in certain areas of the counties. Sometimes when you have a wildlife biologist that shows up on the scene, they're not looking for Bigfoot thing, they're not looking for anything for that. So it's not in their knowledge in their studies, but you know, sometimes I wonder if that could be a possibility too.
Yeah. Very, very well be.
That's just a deeper study.
Yeah. That really is. Yeah. And then I'm personal friends with the archaeologist, anthropologist for the Forest Service here in Baker. She adamantly denies Bigfoot. And I'm a little too, I mean, it's like they'll protest too much, you know, kind of thing. Yeah. Any other questions, stories? No?
I can break the ice with this story.
Okay,
This
cool.
is from a long, long time ago, 100 years ago when I was still a teenager. This is down on the North Umpqua Drainage
Okay.
and back up Little River. And I and my then soon-to-be husband were, you know, we were out for an afternoon like young people are, and went way up this creek that he knew about. It was just full of crawdads, beautiful pool. And going in, we had to drive forever. This is remote, really remote. And then we had to take off hiking and hike probably 3/4 of a mile to get to the stream side. On the way, I smelled something. Oh my God, I have to this day, I have not forgotten that smell. I didn't know what it was at the time. I had no idea. I never saw it. I never saw it, but there was this horrible, horrible stench. I was just sure that we just walked over something that had been dead for a month. You know, just a stink. And it wasn't until sometime later I became familiar with the legend of Bigfoot and the smell. And I realized that, yeah, there's no doubt in my mind today that that's what we smelled then.
Yeah, the closest I've ever heard somebody explain it was skunk, wet dog, and onions.
I'm just gonna go with you, Kate.
Yeah. So, and like I said, and they don't all smell that way. I get plenty of reports that, you know, they don't smell anything. And like I said, I think it's teenage boys.
Been playing with it too much.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, well, okay, so having been a teacher, okay, and my wife's a high school teacher, really honestly, when the junior high, when kids go through puberty, they really smell bad. So I think it's the same thing. You know, it's teenage Bigfoot going through puberty.
Kind of like what we're kind of
Yeah. They start sweating and smelling bad. Yes, sir.
That's the right lady over there, and I was out, setting up a hunting camp here about 3 years ago. Just got our bonfire going, camp set up, sat back to relax. And we're enjoying the campfire, and all of a sudden, kind of off to our, kind of to the northwest of our camp, we hear 3 big loud whoops. We both said it each at the same time, Bigfoot. And about that time, we heard another one off to our northeast. One that started out kind of like a coyote, but then turned into a big roar. And I asked her if she wanted me to answer it. She said no.
I didn't want to jump it.
Yeah.
And that was only about, 12 miles west of town.
Here.
From Baker
Yes.
City. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, we got some wood recordings that I actually just shared with, oh gosh, who's the guy I had on my show last week? The name just went out of my head. Where's my wife? Okay. Who was on the show last week?
Ron Moorhead.
Ron Moorhead. Okay, I was just talking with Ron Moorhead last week, and we played a recording that I got on Mount Emily out of the Grand, and he said it was identical to one that he got down. He listened to it and he said, "I don't have to tell you, you know what that is." That was his answer. But where we got that recording was there's a road that goes up Mount Emily, you go past the dump in LeGrand. Fox Hill. So I remember that. I'm getting old, my brain's going. But we were up there, and we were actually following up on a report. A couple had been up there huckleberrying in the huckleberry patch, and they had a stump about this big come out of the woods and flew over their head about 50 yards. And they immediately packed up and grabbed the kids and left.
And you can see that episode on our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Someone stole my huckleberry.
Yeah, it's called Someone Stole My Huckleberry. Yeah, but we took the couple back up to that area, and they showed me exactly where they were standing and the stump and everything. And so they left. They didn't want to stay there after it got dark. But my Squatch partner and I stayed there. And we set up sound recorders overnight, and we had infrared cameras, and we didn't catch the whoop while we were there. It was later after we left. We had our recorders running all night though. Went back and got it and found it on the recording later. But what did happen to us that night is we heard the weirdest sound I think I've ever heard in the woods. Now, I've heard grouse. Have you ever heard a grouse thump a log? You know, something like that. Yeah, like they're playing a drum. I've heard that. This was not that. We heard basically that, but a lot louder, a lot deeper, like it was a big barrel. Boom, 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 boom. You know, and I could have wrote it off as a grouse, but at that time, I was looking through I have infrared binoculars that record, and they do record sound, but they didn't pick it up. It was too far away. But I was actually looking at an elk that was just probably maybe 100 yards from us, kind of grazing on a hillside. I was watching the elk and heard that sound. The elk lifted his head up, looked in the direction that sound came, and turned and walked off. Like the elk knew what it was, you know, and they avoided it. We stayed there a couple hours after that, but nothing happened. But we did get the recording of the whoop afterwards. Okay, any other questions?
Yes. while you're talking about sounds, do Bigfoots make whistles?
Yes.
Because I,
Dawn and I heard one that day,
so what did it sound like?
a whistle. But a lot louder and a little higher. And actually, to be honest with you,
Was it a one note?
mhm,
Okay.
yeah, but we actually, we took the whistle sound, and my wife is a vocal coach. She's a choir teacher, and
Pre-pandemic was.
pre-pandemic was. Okay. Well, we connected with her professor, Dr. Hansen from Anderson University, okay, and in North Carolina.
South Carolina.
South Carolina. Anderson University in South Carolina. We actually,
Gracie, right?
we actually, while we were driving across the we stopped and visited him, by the way. So, he does really good barbecue in South Carolina. Anyway, so we were at his house and we were actually playing the sounds that we were recording, and we played a whistle for him. And then later on, we talked him into coming on our show, which we had 5 minutes left. Anyway, so we're coming on our show, and we were playing sounds with him, and now this guy's a vocal coach. He's an expert in sounds that humans make, basically. He knows the biology of the voice box that humans have. We played these sounds for him. We played a lot of the Sierra sounds from 1970. That Ron Moorhead, the guy I was talking about, he recorded a bunch of sounds. That he's kind of the sound guy, expert in the Bigfoot world. And he's about 80 years old. But anyway, we played some of the sounds for him. And he was putting them in his computer and doing, what's that called, spectrograph thing with sounds. And what really was interesting to me is when we played a whistle, he said, "That's not a whistle." And I said, "What?" He goes, "That's not a whistle. That's made with a vocal cord." That
It's called the whistle register.
whistle register of the vocal cords. They're not putting their lips together and whistling. They're actually can
It's like,
scream at a highest pitch that sounds like a whistle.
it's beyond the male falsetto even.
Yeah.
So even this soprano cannot do that. But it is accessible. There are some human tribes that have been able to access that whistle register, but you're not going to find them here.
Right. The humans used to have, and this is what
Yeah.
they explained to us, humans used to have 3 folds in their vocal cords, and they could actually reach that register. And some tribes, like in South America,
South America.
have maintained that. They still have 3 folds in their vocal cords. We don't. Europeans, North Americans, we don't have to. So if you have that extra fold in your vocal cords, you can reach ranges that humans can't hear even, both low and high. And there's this thing that's called infrasound, and I was talking with a guy here earlier about that, and he was talking, and I know tigers do this, and if you listen, tigers can growl so low you can't hear it, but you can feel it. It triggers the human fight or flight. And they do that on purpose. If they want you to leave, they will growl so low that you can't hear it and you will run away. I have got reports right here in Baker City, actually North Howard, okay, of a couple who saw they were up cutting wood and there was snow on the ground. And he said it was very interesting where they were cutting wood, there was a herd of deer that stayed with them and wouldn't leave. Odd. Okay. And he said they loaded up and they were driving down the road off the hill, and this is up actually Wolf Creek, area. And he said they literally saw a Bigfoot walk across the road and go across the road up a little hill and stand behind a tree. They stopped, got out, was trying to get their cameras on their phone. Next thing they knew, they were running back to the car and driving off the mountain. He said it was like something controlled their mind and made them jump in the car and drive away and not take a picture. And I think this is that low range where they can put you in a fight or flight. I had another gentleman right up here, off in, what's the road to Anthony Lakes? Anthony Lakes Highway. He was logging off Anthony Lakes area, and he went to his logging camp in the morning and found stuff thrown all over the place. And next thing he knew, he was running, and he was half a mile away from the camp down the road before he realized he was running.
Now, if you want a different interpretation of infrasound, you want to go to our YouTube channel and watch last week's interview with Juan Morgan. A totally different take.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got a whole different take on that.
I like his too.
Yeah. Okay, I'm the scientist. She's the woo-woo person.
Well, have there been any studies with this infrasound, like going out trying to record it and see, or do they just do it for a warning?
Yeah, no, well, they do it for a warning, but yes, there is studies. In fact, there's actually an app you can download on your phone now that will record infrasound and tell you it's happening. You can't hear it, but the phone can. So you can download that app and record infrasound, and it'll tell you that you got it.
Well, have they recorded a lot of incidences of this happening?
Yeah,
And
tons of
were
them.
there any conclusions drawn from it?
Yeah, it's infrasound. No, I am trying to help. No, they just believe it's because of that register thing that these, and what some people believe is like mind control is basically physics.
And all the woo-woo stuff that he jokes about is quantum physics.
Basically
Woo-woo is
physics.
just science we haven't quite figured out yet.
Yeah, it's basically physics. But,
Yeah.
But, let's see, I'm just gonna go somewhere.
I am changing your supplements.
I know. Oh, I know. But, so there's that. The sound is way higher and way lower than we can understand.
So Sasquatch will make a higher sound as well as a lower? Okay.
The register is way, okay, what is it, 3 and 5?
I think 3 and 5,
Yeah.
yes.
We can do 3 octaves. Humans can do
Generally
3
Mariah
octaves.
Carey's got us kind of beat on that, but.
Yeah, she can do
maybe
like
she's
4.
smart, yeah.
But, Bigfoot can do 5 octaves. So the sounds
So
they
you
can,
cover like the whole piano.
yeah, the whole piano. So, and some of the stuff that we played for, the professor from Anderson University, when he put in the spectrograph, he said these things are doing 2 to 3 tones at once that humans can't do because they got that extra cold. So the sounds they can make, they can do a range of sounds that we can't even comprehend making. And we get a lot of stories from people hearing owls and coyotes and stuff like that. You've probably heard this story before, that they can mimic other animals and do a really good job at it.
We have a viewer from Selma, Oregon,
Okay,
who would like, this is Terry,
okay, all right.
and he would like to point out that Sasquatch appear to have their own sonic fingerprint that differentiates them from other known creatures.
Okay, what did he say?
Leave it to Terry.
Leave it to Terry. Terry's one of our researchers from Cave Junction, or Selma.
Selma.
Same thing.
Well, they get me back to the whistling. If they can mimic other sounds, can they mimic birds and make like a 2 or 3 tone whistle sound?
Yep.
Okay,
Okay.
all right. I had another experience that I've been blaming on Sasquatch for the last 6 years.
Okay.
This is down in the Rogue River, floating wild river, and
But
we're.
that's what Terry's from. That's down there.
Listen up, Terry.
But anyway, it's nighttime and it's about time to bed. I hear this whistle and it's like a 3-tone whistle. It's dark out. What kind of bird is that? Couldn't imagine. And I whistled back at it and it whistled back at me. Well, we had this little conversation going for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, continue. It never stopped. And that can't be a bird. I'm going, Sasquatch, it's gotta be Sasquatch. But I never really took it seriously because tequila was involved. But I mean, could it have been?
Yeah, absolutely could have been. I mean,
Okay.
we've had tree knocking back and forth that we've done, in Maine, actually. We did some tree knocking and got some other tree knocks back. And if you're not familiar with Maine and the North Maine woods, it is millions of acres of trees. And you think Oregon has trees. We have big trees. They have small trees, really close together, and a lot of them. I don't know how moose walk through those forests with those antlers. I mean, this is the thickest forest I mean, you can't see 30 feet in any direction. I mean, up in the North Maine woods.
You can't get sunlight through.
Yeah, it's horrible. But, so we were knocking on trees and hearing stuff, on 2 different directions from us. And I think that's a thing that they do to locate each other, basically. That's just a guess. But after about 20 minutes of doing that, we had a rock come through the forest over our heads. And so, like, we were doing their location thing, and they located us and came and saw who we were and said, "Hey, you're not a Bigfoot, get out of here." Threw a rock at me, so,
Did you leave them?
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a story that goes kind of like with her story about the birds. When I was a kid, we had a cabin back over in the Eagle, out of Medical Springs area there in the Eagle Creek area. And at night, we'd sit by the fire, we'd hear these birds. We thought, for a long time, we thought these birds. We always heard them up on the one hill on the east side of the creek. I always thought they're some kind of strange bird. Never thought much about it until later years. But then we also hunted down there on deer season. We always went there for our first weekend. My dad always had to have a Jeep with no top on it in deer season. And it's Sunday, we're headed back to town from there, packing up camp. It's dark. Of course, we're all huddled up, Mom and myself and my dad, and all in the front of this little Jeep, trying to get the heater with the sleeping bag over to keep the heat under. And as we're driving around, my mom hears something whistle go out. She says, my dad, stop. I think it's a lost hunter. Well, that's before my dad got dentures, and he wasn't very good at whistling. So he'd whistle, and whatever this wasn't just like it. So we shut the Jeep off, turned the lights off, and he kept whistling. It got closer and closer. Finally, it's getting close to the bank just above us. My mom said, turn on the lights so he can see you get down. Well, when we turned on the lights, we heard the most god-awful scream that we ever heard in our life. And the Jeep was going as fast as it could. Wow. In later years, I figured it up. I must have been about 11, maybe 12 when that happened. So that was before Patty showed up in the 60s, 70s. So we never dreamed of anything like a Bigfoot back then. But after years went by, we got to discussing it, and that's what we kind of think it was. And same, every time we camp out there, we hear the birds that want that money up. We never heard the birds that had that sound anywhere else except there.
Except there, interesting.
So I'm really thinking about getting brave enough to go back and camp out back there.
Yeah. Carry a big stick. Or do you know? Yeah, and talk about the 411 books, people go missing in the woods. Yeah. So,
Going back to the picture you had there of the sixties, and you were talking about the Sasquatch didn't really have much of a neck, and talking about the shoulders being squared off like that. Can you back that up and take a look at that
sure
slide
can.
again, please?
Well, I hate these sketch pads.
Well, that's okay. because
No, I'm almost there.
I see your Christian.
What?
I see your Christian.
No, every once in a while.
It's on the TV.
That one.
If you can look in there, and we've all looked at that a million times, I know. But talking about the shoulders, you mentioned how they didn't really move, they stayed squared up and neck. And the part that maybe you mentioned it, but I didn't hear it, but there's an awful lot of movement below the shoulders with the arms. And it really stands out in those pictures.
It does.
Just curious about your take on that, the arm movement.
Yeah, it's swinging like a human, basically. But there's some interesting thing. If you look, now, there is a way better version than this now. There's a guy by the name of N.K. Davis, he does video stuff. Anyway, he came out with a 4K version of this film now. And you can actually see the muscles under the skin tense up and like when the calves, when you take a step, your calves get tight. You can see actually the movements, and you can almost do it in this one. You can see the arms. You can see the muscles in the arms. Yeah, in the back,
And the boobs.
in the back. Yeah, and it is a girl. Look, it's boobs right there. Okay. All right. So, yeah, Bigfoot's not all male. They are females, so. And a lot of times, now this is another one of my theories, that when we get glimpses of these things in the woods, it's because they're juveniles that mess up. When Noah and I saw that one, it was a juvenile. Then we heard the whistle, and the thing turned and went towards the whistle. That was mom or dad saying, leave the people alone. Get over here. They believe that somewhere in this photo, and I've never seen it, but that there is an infant somewhere up here. I've heard the story. I can't pick it out, but there's people who said they have. And the only reason they got this video is because this mama walked out across there like a mama bird playing dead or dying to get the people to chase her and not the child that's in the woods. And I've got a report out of Utah where a gentleman was driving up in the woods. It would have been east of Salt Lake. I forgot what the mountains those are. But anyway, he was up in the mountains deer hunting, and he came around the corner and he saw a Bigfoot, an infant, and it was standing next to the ditch in the road, and the adult pushed the infant down in the ditch and then turned and walked in front of his vehicle and off into the woods. It's a follow me, don't follow my child production. But this video here is probably the best Bigfoot video that's been taken in history. This has been scrutinized 1 million times by 1 million people, and they have never proved it wrong, fake. Because it was 1967 before digital anything.
Mm-hmm.
And this is no way. Okay, just think about this. If this was a person in the suit, remember the original Planet of the Apes? same time period. And that's the best they could do
Mhm.
in the original Planet of the Apes. It's not even close to this. Doesn't walk like a person. National Geographic took this film, went back to this exact area, laser scanned the area, measured every rock, every tree, every pine cone in that area, and took the lens from the camera, the same camera, same lens, figured out the exact distance where this thing was, where it was walking, where the camera was, and everything. They figured out every single, and this is the reason you see this picture going up and down, that was the guy shaking with the camera while he was filming. Okay, this is a stabilized photo or video, but when they measured this, 7'6" is how tall that was.
Wow.
There was a guy that came out later on who said he was the guy in the suit. He's 6'2". He's 6'2", and he did not know how to get to where this was. So, and that's some rough country, by the way. It is straight freaking up and straight freaking down.
We were there, not
We
too
were
long
there in
March?
March.
Where is
We were
it
in Bluff
located?
Creek.
Where is it?
Bluff Creek, California. Bluff Creek Mountains, just outside of Willow Creek, California. Yeah, we spent a week in the mountains there.
Terry wants to, just let everyone know that Bob Gimlin has confirmed your comments about other Sasquatch being in the area, because Bob was there.
Okay. There was two guys on horseback, Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson. Roger Patterson passed away, but Bob's still alive. Here. Watching my channel. Okay.
He's a stellar human being.
He's a stellar human being. So, yeah. And another thing, if you had these two guys who filmed this were both cowboys from Yakima, Washington. That's where she's from. In fact, she grew up across the street from Roger Patterson. And she didn't know who he was when she was a kid.
I was 9.
But there's no possible way these two cowboys from Yakima, Washington could have built a suit that couldn't be built in that day. And even thinking about little things like how it would walk. It doesn't walk like a human. And who thinks about putting boobs on costumes? But you can actually see in the 4K version.
Right there, you can see your calf pretty good one too.
Yep. I wonder if, I'm going to shut this down for a second. Oh, I did. Here's something on my computer. Something I do. Okay. Oh, okay, that's my background screen. I think on this computer I have the 4K version. Just gotta find it. By the way, if you're wondering what flag that is, it's the flag of my people.
Great.
Acadian. Down south they call us Cajuns. Okay. I just dumped everything on the screen or something. Because I just got a. No. It's water.
Hey, Scott, would you say goodbye to our virtual viewing audience?
Okay. Shall we do the thing?
Okay, I'll be right back. All right. Let's do
Okay,
it.
thank you for watching. Like and subscribe.
Yes, please like and subscribe, like our YouTube channel. Please go to squatchamerica.com, sign up for our newsletter, which you will get every Monday when I'm really on my game. You can support us on Patreon. You can go to GoBuyMeACoffee/Squatch America. Send us a one-time donation, all those things. We love you. We are so grateful that you support us. As always,
Our job,
is to investigate the unexplained.
not to explain and investigate.
So you keep watching and
we'll keep squatching.
bye.
Bye. All right. I'm looking for